Hello everyone and welcome back to another Golang tutorial. So in this video what I'm going to be doing is talking about comparison operators and Boolean expressions, otherwise known as conditions. That's the way I usually like to phrase them. Now there's a bunch of words, again, you've probably heard me say all these random things that you don't understand. Don't worry about the vocabulary behind it, so long as you understand the concept, that is totally fine. So what I'm going to show you here is what is known as the comparison operators. Now, the comparison operators, these are pretty well standard across almost all programming languages. Sometimes they add in a few extra. There's some that are a little bit different. Go is pretty standard. The operators we have is less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, is equal to, and not equal to. So these are kind of the 6 operators we can use to compare different values. So sometimes, and oftentimes actually, we want to check if something is equal to something else, or if something is less than or greater than something else. And there's a lot of math that will come into programming when we can do these kind of things. So we have those operators. Now, how do we use them? These work very similarly to the arithmetic operators that I showed you before, except when we write an expression that contains them, that expression will result in either being true or false. So rather than returning some numeric value like we might have when we added 2 numbers, this will return either true or false based on the comparison that happened. So if I do something like val : equals x less than 5, well, let's look at this. Is x less than 5? No, it's not. So you would assume that this is going to be what then? Well, this should be the value false. So if I actually run the code and look down in the console here, y declared and not used. So let me just comment that out. But if we say x less than 5 and we run this, we get the value of false because x is not less than 5. But what about x less than or equal to 5? Well, that's going to give us the value of true. So let's run this and have a look, and we get true. So the way this operator works is it pretty much says, is x less than or equal to 5? And the basic way to see if you understand how these work is just read it as a sentence, right? I say, is the variable x, and then read the name of the operator, so less than or equal to the value of 5, and you can pretty much determine by yourself whether that's going to be true or false. Now, commonly, we'll also do something like double equal sign. So 2 equal sign stands for is equal to. It checks for equality between these 2 values. So it checks if x is equal to the value 5. Now, in this case, it is, so we will get the answer of true. Now, it's important to note that, like I said, these work very similarly to the arithmetic operators, and that whatever's on the left-hand side and the right-hand side need to be the same type. So if I go ahead and do something like, y equals 6.5, and then I say x equals y, well, obviously we know that's false, but this is actually invalid syntax. We actually can't write this because this is not the same type as this. This is a float and this is an int. So if we wanted to do this comparison, then we would have to convert either this to an int or this to a float. So it would likely make sense to convert this to a float, so we're not losing any information. Float 63, float 64, like that. And now, if we run this, we actually get an answer of false. Now, the other comparison we can do that's like this is not equal to. You can think of this as just the reverse of is equal to, right? So if they are equal, then not equal to will be false. If they're not equal, then not equal to will be true, right? Pretty basic. Again, you can just read the name and that should make sense. So let's see, we get, in this case, false does not equal, wait, what the heck? I don't think I saved the program. Let me run this one more time. That should be the value true. Okay, yeah, so true. There we go. I was confused before. Okay, so there we go. That's the basic operators. I mean, like, I could go through and show you all of them, but I don't think there's too much value in doing that if you understand what these mean. What I will say, though, is I've called, like, this one less than and this one greater than. These don't really have, like, a formal name, at least in my opinion. It's just really based on where you write things. Like, if I write, something that's less and greater here, then the same expression can be defined by just putting less greater here, right? Like, these are the same things if you just flip where the 2 values are. So that's something to keep in mind. That works the same, obviously, with the equal signs too. So there's not one that's less than and one that's greater than. It depends where you put the variables. These could be equivalent expressions. Now, you can also do stuff like this, right? I can say float 64x, like plus 1.5 does not equal y. We can, combine expressions and do that. So let's have a look at this here and see what we get on this. and we get false because these actually are the same value. So the way this works is we actually evaluate any arithmetic operators before we go ahead and do this comparison operator. So you can do things like add 1.5, check if it's less than a value, multiply something within the same line as wherever this comparison operator is. And right here, what I've been doing is storing this in a variable. We don't necessarily need to store that in a variable. In fact, I could take this expression here and just paste it right into the fmt.println. And there won't be any issue with that. It'll give us actually the exact same thing. We've just omitted the step of making that variable. So there we go, we get false. Now, I'll go back. What I want to show you now is comparing strings and some other data types, so not just integers and floats. So let me make a string Tim. I'm going to make a string Tim here with a capital T. Now, my question is pretty much, what do you think is going to happen if I try to compare these two values? So I say if x is equal to y, is that going to give me true or is that going to give me false? Well, let's have a look at it and run it. We are going to get the value of false because this capital T is not the same as this lowercase t. So when we're comparing strings, all of the characters in that string, including any white spaces or anything, need to be the exact same. So just keep that in mind because a lot of people will make that mistake when they're doing this comparisons. So that's how you do it on strings. Now my question is, can I do something like this? Can I do x is less than y? Let's see, is that a valid thing to write? Well, let's run this code and see what we actually end up getting. So we actually get false. So the way that this works is we can actually compare strings using less than and greater than operators. And what that will do is compare what's known as the ASCII value of the characters starting from left to right. So a better way to do this is something like, A and B. So is A less than B? Well, if you think about an alphabet, right? A comes before B, so it would be less than B. But is capital A less than B? Actually, no, it's not. And the reason it's not is because capital letters in the ASCII code table, which is, I guess I could pull up a photo. I'm not going to do that right now. But the way it works is each letter has one number that represents it in the computer. And capital A happens to be 65. And I believe that lowercase a is like 97 or 96 or so. It's like 90 something. The idea is, though, it goes all the uppercase letters, so starting at 65, and then after all of those have finished, it starts at lowercase a and goes up. So any lowercase letters will be actually greater than any of the capital ones. And I'll prove this to you because we say is x less than y, and in this case, well, this would actually be true, but if I swap this around, and maybe actually let's make that C for a better example, and we run this, we are going to get the value of false because B is actually a greater value than C. And that's kind of the idea behind that. So you can compare strings, you can compare characters as well, I believe. So characters are actually defined with single quotation marks. So I could compare the equality between like two C's, like check a double equal sign. Let's have a look at this here. And we get the value true, right? So that's the idea behind this. You can compare pretty much any type of objects. For some things, when we start getting more advanced, it'll become a little bit more complicated, but that's the idea behind comparison operators. Understand that these return true or false. And yeah, if you understand that, you're ready to move on to the next video where we talk about chained conditionals. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.